A mysterious offer from my alien widow neighbor changed everything. It all started on an ordinary evening in a quiet neighborhood. The man, whose name was Daniel, had been living in the same small house for years. His life was simple, almost predictable, filled with the usual routines work during the day, cooking simple meals, watching a little television, and occasionally walking around the neighborhood to stretch his legs. Daniel liked the calmness of his life, but sometimes it felt lonely. Most of his neighbors were polite enough to wave when they passed by, but nobody ever stopped to chat. Life had a way of making people busy, and friendships didn't always last. Next door, in the little house with the faded blue shutters, lived a widow. She had moved in years before, and no one really knew much about her. Her husband had passed away suddenly, and after that, she became even quieter than before. Daniel had seen her only a few times in the first months, carrying groceries or watering her small garden. She seemed shy, almost like she wanted to disappear into the walls of her house. There was something different about her. Something that Daniel couldn't put his finger on, but he always felt a little curious. At first, Daniel didn't think much about her. He had his own life, his own worries, and his days were filled with small tasks. But sometimes when he looked out of his window, he would notice her standing by the fence, staring at the sky with a thoughtful expression. It was a strange habit, but it didn't seem sad or lonely, more like she was searching for something far away. Daniel felt a strange pull to understand her, even though he knew it was unusual to be so curious about a neighbor he barely knew. One chilly evening, Daniel noticed her struggling with her groceries. The wind was strong, and the bags were heavy. Without thinking too much, he grabbed his jacket and ran across the yard to help her. "Here, let me help you," he said, taking some of the weight from her hands. She looked at him with surprise, her eyes wide, and for a moment, Daniel felt as if he had done something important. She thanked him quietly, her voice soft, almost musical, and a small smile appeared on her face. That tiny smile stayed with Daniel long after he returned to his own house. After that night, Daniel found himself noticing small things about her more often. He saw how she kept her garden neat, planting little flowers along the edges of her porch. Sometimes he would catch her reading a book by the window in the late afternoon light. She always seemed to be careful, moving with purpose, but there was also a gentle sadness around her, like she was carrying something heavy inside. Daniel couldn't explain why, but he felt that if he got to know her, he might understand a little more about life itself. Weeks passed, and small moments began to build a connection, even if it was unspoken. One morning, Daniel found her struggling again, this time with a broken fence gate that wouldn't close. He went over and offered to fix it. She hesitated at first, as if unsure whether to accept help, but eventually she nodded. As Daniel worked, she stood nearby, watching silently. When the gate finally closed properly, she whispered a quiet thank you that felt like a secret shared between two people. That moment made Daniel realize how little acts of kindness could open doors, even for someone who seemed impossible to reach. Despite the growing familiarity, the widow remained mysterious. She never talked about her past or her husband, and she never asked much about Daniel's life. She seemed to float through her days like a shadow, present but not fully seen. Yet Daniel felt a strange comfort in her presence, a feeling that his life had been missing without him knowing it. Something about her quiet strength and her careful movements drew him in, even if he didn't fully understand why. One late afternoon, as Daniel was returning from work, he noticed her sitting on her porch, holding a small cup of tea. The sun was low in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the yard. She looked at him and waved softly. Daniel waved back, but this time he felt a little different. There was something gentle and fragile about her, like a bird that had been through storms but still held on. He wanted to know her story, but he didn't want to scare her away with too many questions. Days turned into weeks, and their interactions remained small but meaningful. Sometimes they exchanged greetings. Sometimes she handed him a basket of fresh vegetables from her garden, or a warm loaf of bread she had baked. Daniel began to realize that this quiet, mysterious neighbor was slowly becoming a part of his life. He felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness whenever he saw her. as if something important was waiting to happen, something he could not yet understand. Despite the calm, ordinary rhythm of the neighborhood, there were small hints that her life was not like anyone else's. Sometimes, Daniel would catch glimpses of unusual objects in her yard, small, shimmering stones or strange plants he had never seen before. She never explained them, and Daniel didn't dare ask. There was a sense of wonder around her, something that made him feel both curious and careful. It was as if she carried a secret that was larger than life itself, and Daniel could feel it in the way she moved and smiled. The turning point came one evening when Daniel found her sitting quietly on her porch looking up at the stars. The sky was clear, and the stars sparkled like tiny diamonds. She didn't notice him at first, but when he waved, she smiled warmly and invited him to sit. For the first time, she spoke at length, telling small stories about her husband, her travels, and her love for quiet nights under the sky. Daniel listened, captivated, feeling that the world had suddenly become bigger and more mysterious. Her stories were gentle, filled with both sadness and hope. And Daniel realized that her life, though strange and different, had lessons he had never learned before. By the end of that evening, Daniel felt a connection he could not explain. The quiet widow next door, with all her mysteries and unspoken stories, had become someone important to him. He knew that life was about to change in ways he could not yet imagine, and he felt a mixture of excitement, curiosity, and a little fear. Something about her presence, her sadness, and her quiet strength had touched him deeply. For the first time in years, Daniel felt that his life had a new direction waiting, one that was uncertain but full of possibility. From that night on, Daniel's life became a little brighter. The quiet widow was no longer just a neighbor. She was a presence that made him notice the small joys and mysteries of life. Every smile, every small gesture, and every shared moment created a sense of anticipation, like a story unfolding slowly, patiently, and beautifully. Daniel didn't know what the future held, but he felt ready to discover it, step by step. With the mysterious woman next door who had quietly changed his world without even realizing it. Over the following weeks, Daniel and the widow, whose name he had learned was Leora, began to speak more often. Their conversations were small at first, full of casual greetings and polite questions about the weather or daily tasks. But slowly, a deeper understanding began to grow between them. Daniel noticed that Leora was unlike anyone he had ever met. She had a calmness about her that seemed almost unshakable, even when life felt difficult. At the same time, there was a sadness hidden in her eyes, a quiet pain she carried but rarely spoke about. One morning, Daniel saw Leora sitting on her porch with a cup of tea, staring at the horizon. He waved, and she smiled softly, motioning for him to come over. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if it was polite to intrude, but the warmth in her eyes encouraged him. As he approached, she offered him the seat beside her, and they sat in silence for a few moments. The air was filled with the gentle sounds of birds and rustling leaves. It was one of those rare moments when the world seemed to slow down, and Daniel felt a peacefulness he hadn't known in a long time. Finally, Leora spoke. Her voice was soft, measured, but carried a weight of emotion. "I sometimes wonder if anyone really sees me," she said quietly. Daniel nodded, understanding in a way he couldn't fully explain. "I think many people are too busy to notice others," he replied. Leora looked at him and smiled faintly. "I've learned that being alone can be both comforting and lonely. It teaches you patience, but it also reminds you of what you are missing." Her words made Daniel pause. There was a depth in her voice, as if she had lived through experiences far beyond what most people could imagine. He didn't ask directly, but he sensed that she had faced hardships he could barely comprehend. Over time, their talks became more personal. Leora shared stories of her late husband, gentle memories filled with both joy and sorrow. Daniel listened attentively, feeling honored that she trusted him enough to speak of her past. One afternoon, Daniel helped Leora carry a box from her porch to inside her house. Inside, he noticed objects that seemed unusual: small tools, curious shapes, and fabrics that shimmered faintly in the light. Leora caught him glancing and smiled. "Some things are just reminders of who we were, or who we are," she said softly. Daniel didn't press further, sensing that these objects held meanings she wasn't ready to explain. Instead, he nodded, respecting her privacy. While feeling an odd mix of curiosity and awe, as days passed, Daniel realized that these small interactions were becoming the highlight of his life. Seeing Leora, talking with her, even the smallest gestures like handing her groceries or sharing a loaf of bread, brought a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He noticed how careful she was in her routines, how she organized her garden, cleaned her house, and prepared her meals. Yet there was a quiet mystery in her movements, a precision that suggested she had knowledge and experiences that went beyond ordinary human life. One evening, as Daniel was walking home from work, he saw Leora sitting by her window looking up at the stars. She waved at him, and he waved back. When he approached, she motioned for him to join her outside. The night was calm, the air crisp, and the stars shone brightly overhead. Leora handed him a warm cup of tea and said, "I like nights like this. They remind me that the world is bigger than our troubles." Daniel smiled and nodded. "I feel the same. It's peaceful." They sat together quietly, sharing the stillness of the night. Words unnecessary to feel a connection growing between them. Over time, subtle hints began to reveal that Leora was not entirely like the people around them. She spoke of her experiences in ways that sounded unusual, mentioning places she had seen that no human could easily reach or events that seemed impossible to explain. Daniel noticed that she seemed to understand things quickly, with insights that went beyond his normal reasoning. Still, she never pressed the topic or explained herself fully. There was a trust in her silence, a careful way of sharing only what she chose to reveal. Their friendship deepened as they shared more personal moments. Daniel confided in her about his struggles, his work, his loneliness, and his uncertainty about the future. Leora listened without judgment, her presence alone providing comfort. She offered small pieces of advice, gentle guidance that seemed to come from experience far older than her appearance suggested. Daniel felt that she could see him more clearly than he often saw himself. It was both reassuring and humbling. One day, Daniel noticed Leora moving more slowly, a hint of exhaustion in her steps. He offered to help with chores, and she accepted. As he swept the porch and tidied the garden, he felt a sense of connection that was stronger than before. It was no longer just neighborly kindness. It was something deeper, a bond formed through trust and shared moments. Leora watched him quietly, her expression soft, as if she was grateful for more than just the help with tasks. There were moments of levity as well. Leora had a gentle sense of humor, often making small jokes about her awkward attempts at cooking or the strange habits of neighborhood animals. Daniel found himself laughing more than he had in months. These small joys, shared in simple ways, created a sense of warmth between them that neither could ignore. Daniel began to feel that life, which had seemed routine and predictable, now had a spark of unpredictability and wonder because of her, despite the growing closeness. Leora remained careful about what she shared. There were parts of her life that she kept hidden, things she didn't explain, and Daniel respected that. He began to understand that some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved, and that trust was not about knowing everything, but about being present and supportive. He also noticed that her sadness, though subtle, never completely left her. It was as if the past was always with her, shaping the way she moved through the world. One afternoon, Daniel helped Leora repair a small section of her fence that had fallen. As they worked side by side, she spoke softly, telling him about her husband and how they had built a home together. She described the joy of small, shared moments, the kind that most people overlook. Daniel listened intently, realizing that life's meaning could be found in these tiny, everyday acts. Leora's words carried a gentle wisdom that made him reflect on his own life and how little he had. Appreciated these simple moments, their interactions became a steady rhythm, a shared understanding that neither needed to fully define. Daniel felt that he was learning from her in ways he hadn't expected. Leora had an unspoken strength, a quiet determination to keep moving forward despite the weight of loss. She seemed to understand human emotions deeply, yet there was something otherworldly about her calmness and insight. Daniel often wondered about it, but he never asked directly, sensing that the truth, when shared, would come at its own time. By the end of part 2, Daniel and Leora had developed a relationship built on quiet trust and mutual understanding. Their connection was subtle, yet profound, growing through small acts of kindness, shared moments, and gentle conversations. Daniel began to realize that life could be richer and more meaningful when someone who truly understood you appeared unexpectedly. Leora, despite her mysteries and the weight of her past, had opened a door to a world Daniel had never fully known, one filled with wonder, trust, and the possibility of change. As the weeks passed, Daniel's bond with Leora grew stronger. Their daily conversations and shared moments had created a quiet trust between them. Yet, there was always a sense of something unspoken, a mystery lingering in the air whenever they were together. Daniel often wondered about her past and her unusual knowledge of the world, but he never pressed her. Somehow he knew that she would share what she wanted. When she was ready, one rainy evening, Daniel returned home from work, his coat wet and his shoes splashed with mud. As he approached his house, he noticed Leora standing under the small porch roof, holding an umbrella that barely covered her. She smiled when she saw him, but there was a seriousness in her eyes that made him pause. "Daniel, can we talk?" she asked softly. There was no urgency in her voice, only a calm insistence that made him nod. He walked over, careful to avoid puddles, and stood beside her under the dripping umbrella. Leora took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. "I've been thinking about you a lot," she said, "and about trust. About how we share our lives with others. I want to offer you something. Something important, but I need you to consider it carefully." Daniel felt a rush of curiosity, but also a flicker of unease. What kind of offer could a quiet neighbor like Leora be talking about? He nodded slowly, waiting for her to continue. She gestured for him to sit on the small bench nearby. Daniel complied, his mind racing with questions. Leora's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together, a rare sign of vulnerability from her. "I can't explain everything right now," she said, "but I need someone I can trust completely. Someone who will not judge me and will help me with something very personal. It's not dangerous, not in the usual sense, but it is unusual." Daniel listened carefully, his heart beating faster. He had grown used to Leora's calm presence, but now there was a weight to her words he had never noticed before. He wanted to ask what she meant, but he also felt that interrupting would be wrong. So he remained silent, letting her speak in her own time. The rain fell softly around them, and for a moment, all he could hear was the gentle patter of drops against the ground. "I know this is sudden," Leora continued, "and you might think it's strange. But I've learned that some things in life are meant for the right person at the right time. You've been kind, patient, and understanding. I feel that maybe you are the person I can trust for this." She paused, and Daniel could see the hesitation in her eyes. He realized that whatever she was about to ask was something deeply personal and possibly life-changing. Finally, she spoke, her voice almost a whisper. "I need your help with something that I cannot do alone. It's not just a favor. It's a responsibility. And it will require trust, patience, and understanding beyond the ordinary." Daniel swallowed hard, feeling both excitement and nervousness. His life had been simple, predictable, even lonely at times. But here was a chance for something extraordinary, an opportunity that could change everything. "What? What kind of responsibility?" he asked carefully, his voice steady even though his mind raced. Leora looked at him, her eyes glimmering with an emotion he could not name. "I can't explain fully yet," she said, "but I promise nothing will hurt you. I will guide you, and you will be safe. This is about sharing a part of my life that very few people will ever know. It's about trust and connection, about understanding things that are beyond what most humans experience." Daniel's mind swirled with possibilities. He thought about her strange knowledge, the unusual objects he had seen in her house, her quiet but extraordinary wisdom. He realized that her life was more complex and mysterious than he had ever imagined. Yet, despite the uncertainty, there was something in his heart telling him that this was the right moment. Leora had chosen him for a reason, and he felt a mix of fear and excitement at what might come next. I want to help, Daniel said finally, his voice firm. I trust you, Leora. I'll do whatever you need. Leora's eyes softened, and a small smile appeared on her face, a smile that carried both relief and gratitude. Thank you, she said. I knew you would understand. You don't even realize how much this means to me. Over the next few days, Leora began preparing Daniel for what was to come. She shared small hints, little instructions, and subtle guidance. She explained that he would need patience, careful observation, and the ability to remain calm in situations that might seem unusual or confusing. Daniel listened intently, absorbing every detail, even though he still didn't understand the full picture. He realized that whatever he was about to experience would require trust in her and trust in himself. One evening, Leora invited him inside her house. The interior was warm and cozy, filled with soft lights and comforting scents. On a small table lay objects that Daniel had never seen before, devices and materials that seemed unfamiliar, even otherworldly. Leora noticed his gaze and smiled gently. These are part of what I've been preparing. You don't need to understand them fully yet. You only need to learn their purpose and use them carefully when the time comes. Daniel nodded, trying to hide the mixture of curiosity and awe he felt. He realized that this was no ordinary responsibility. Leora's life, her experiences, and her mysteries were far beyond what he had imagined. And yet, he felt a sense of purpose he had never known. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt that his life had a direction, a mission that was meaningful and important. Over the following week, Leora began teaching him small tasks. She explained processes, shared instructions, and guided him step by step. Some of the tasks were simple, like organizing objects or observing patterns. Others were more complex, requiring careful thought and attention to detail. Daniel approached each task with determination, knowing that Leora was relying on him. With every step, he felt more connected to her, more involved in something larger than himself. Despite the growing intensity of their work, there were moments of lightness and laughter. Leora's quiet humor would occasionally shine through, making Daniel laugh and easing the tension. They shared tea and small meals, talking about ordinary things, even while preparing for extraordinary moments. Daniel realized that trust and understanding were not just about completing tasks. They were about sharing life in both the ordinary and the extraordinary moments. One night, as Daniel was leaving Leora's house, she took his hand gently. "Thank you for trusting me," she said. "I know this is unusual, and it may seem strange, but your willingness to be part of this means more than words can express." Daniel felt warmth spread through him. He had expected something mysterious, perhaps even frightening, but instead, he felt a sense of connection and purpose that made everything else in his life fade away. The next day, Leora gave him a small, carefully wrapped object. "This will help you understand the first step," she said. "Keep it safe and follow my instructions closely. I will guide you, but you must also trust your instincts. This is the beginning of something that will change everything." Daniel took the object with care, feeling the weight of responsibility and the promise of something extraordinary. As he walked home that evening, Daniel thought about how much his life had changed in just a few weeks. The quiet widow next door, once a mysterious figure he barely knew, had offered him something beyond anything he could have imagined. It was not just a task or a favor, it was a trust, a connection, and an opportunity to see the world in a new way. Daniel felt a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and awe. That night, as he lay in bed, he could not stop thinking about Leora and the mysterious offer she had made. He wondered what the next steps would be, what challenges he would face, and how this experience would shape his life. One thing was certain. He had chosen to trust her, and that choice had opened a door to a world he could never have imagined. A world full of mysteries, challenges, and unexpected beauty. Waiting to be discovered step by step, Daniel knew that from this moment forward, his life would never be the same. Leora's trust in him, the lessons she had already begun to share, and the tasks he was learning to complete were all parts of a journey that promised growth, understanding, and transformation. And deep inside, he felt ready. Ready to face the unknown, ready to embrace the extraordinary, and ready to walk beside Leora in a way that would forever change both their lives. The following days marked the beginning of a new chapter in Daniel's life. Leora's mysterious offer had changed everything. He quickly realized that his world, once predictable, was now filled with unexpected challenges. Each morning, he woke with a mix of excitement and nervousness, wondering what tasks Leora would ask him to perform and what new mysteries he would encounter. The simple, quiet life he had known before seemed distant now, replaced by a rhythm that demanded attention, patience, and careful observation. Leora began guiding him through more complex tasks. She showed him objects he had never seen before, each with a purpose that was difficult to understand at first. Some objects seemed delicate and fragile, requiring steady hands and concentration. Others had patterns and movements that Daniel struggled to follow. Leora patiently explained their functions, often repeating instructions in different ways until he could grasp them. Daniel realized that these tasks were not just practical, they were lessons in focus, trust, and responsibility. At first, Daniel struggled. He made mistakes, dropped objects, misread instructions, and sometimes felt frustrated. Yet every time he faltered, Leora's calm voice encouraged him. "It's okay," she would say gently. "Mistakes are part of learning. What matters is that you keep trying and pay attention." Her patience was steady and unwavering, and Daniel found himself drawing strength from it. He began to see that this experience was teaching him far more than any ordinary task could. It was teaching him about perseverance, empathy, and the importance of staying calm under pressure. Despite the challenges, there were moments of quiet joy. Daniel and Leora shared small meals together, laughing softly over minor mishaps and stories from their pasts. Daniel learned about the gentle humor that had always been part of Leora's personality, the way she could make even difficult moments feel lighter. These shared moments reminded him that even amid challenges, there was room for kindness, laughter, and connection. The growing bond between them was becoming a foundation that made the mysterious tasks feel less daunting. One afternoon, Daniel encountered a particularly difficult task. Leora had given him a device that required careful handling, precise timing, and deep concentration. At first, he was overwhelmed, unsure how to proceed. The instructions were complicated, and the object seemed unpredictable. He felt a wave of doubt. Maybe he wasn't ready. Maybe he had taken on more than he could handle. But then Leora gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "You can do this," she said softly. "I know it. Trust yourself as much as you trust me." Her words had a weight and calmness that steadied his racing mind. Taking a deep breath, he tried again, step by step, and slowly he succeeded. That success brought a wave of confidence. Daniel began to see that Leora's offer, though mysterious and challenging, was helping him grow in ways he had never imagined. Each task, each moment of learning, was teaching him to be patient, attentive, and thoughtful. He realized that life was not only about routines and comfort, it was about embracing challenges, facing fears, and trusting in others when the path was unclear. However, the experience was not without difficulty. There were moments of doubt, frustration, and even fear. Some tasks seemed impossible, and Daniel often questioned whether he was capable of completing them. He worried about disappointing Leora, and at times he wondered if he had made a mistake by accepting her offer. Yet, every time he struggled, Leora's quiet confidence reminded him that he was not alone. Her presence, her guidance, and her unwavering trust gave him courage to continue, even when the tasks felt overwhelming. One evening, after a long day of practice and learning, Daniel sat on Leora's porch, exhausted but reflective. Leora joined him, handing him a warm cup of tea. They sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the gentle hum of the evening. Finally, she spoke. "You've done well today," she said softly. "I know it hasn't been easy, and I know it has tested you in ways you didn't expect. But I want you to know that every step you take matters. Every effort you make is part of something greater." Daniel felt a swell of gratitude and understanding. He realized that this experience was about more than tasks. It was about trust, growth, and shared purpose. As the days continued, Daniel noticed changes within himself. He was more patient, more aware, and more confident in his abilities. He had learned to stay calm under pressure, to think carefully before acting, and to trust his instincts. Even small successes brought a sense of accomplishment and pride. At the same time, he felt a deeper connection to Leora, understanding her not just as a neighbor, but as someone who had chosen him for a reason. Their bond was no longer just friendly, it had become a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared experience. Yet there were moments when the weight of responsibility felt heavy. Daniel sometimes worried that he was failing Leora, or that he might make a mistake with consequences he could not foresee. During these moments, Leora's calm reassurance helped him regain confidence. She would gently remind him that growth often comes through difficulty, that mistakes are part of learning, and that he was stronger than he realized. Daniel began to see that the true lesson was not only about completing tasks, but about developing resilience, patience, and self-belief. Through these experiences, Daniel also began to understand the depth of Leora's own struggles. Her past, her loss, and the loneliness she had endured were evident in the quiet strength she displayed every day. He realized that her trust in him was not given lightly, it was a gift, a sign that she believed in his character and his ability to rise to the challenge. This understanding deepened his respect and admiration for her, strengthening the bond that had grown between them. One particularly quiet night, Daniel found himself reflecting on everything he had experienced so far. He thought about the day he had first helped her with groceries, the small conversations on her porch, and the mysterious offer that had led him into this new chapter. He realized that life, which had once seemed predictable and simple, was now rich with meaning, challenge, and connection. He felt a sense of gratitude not just for the tasks and lessons, but for the trust and companionship that Leora had shared with him as the weeks turned into months. Daniel's transformation became more evident. He approached tasks with confidence, handled challenges with patience, and approached life with a new perspective. He had learned that responsibility and trust could lead to personal growth, that connections with others could open doors to experiences far beyond ordinary life. Leora, in turn, seemed to grow more comfortable and at ease, her quiet smiles reflecting satisfaction and relief at Daniel's steady progress. Yet, despite the progress, there remained a sense of mystery. Daniel knew he had only begun to understand Leora's world, and that more challenges and revelations awaited. The tasks he had completed were just the beginning, and he felt both anticipation and determination as he looked toward the future. He realized that life's true lessons often came in unexpected forms, and that the courage to embrace the unknown could lead to remarkable growth. One evening, as Daniel helped Leora organize her unusual collection of objects, she paused and looked at him intently. "You've come far," she said softly, "not just in learning the tasks, but in understanding trust, patience, and resilience. I knew you could do it, but you have proven it with your heart and your actions." Daniel felt a warm sense of pride and humility. He understood that this journey was as much about inner growth as it was about completing any physical task. By the end of this phase of their journey, Daniel had changed profoundly. The man who had once lived a simple, quiet life was now more aware, capable, and confident. He had learned to trust himself, to embrace challenges, and to value connection and responsibility. Leora's mysterious offer, once daunting and unclear, had become a transformative experience that shaped his mind, heart, and outlook on life. He also realized that the bond between him and Leora was stronger than ever. What had begun as simple, neighborly kindness had grown into a deep connection built on trust, mutual respect, and shared growth. Daniel knew that this journey was far from over, but he felt ready for whatever challenges and revelations lay ahead. With Leora by his side, he understood that life's mysteries were not meant to be feared, but to be embraced step by step with courage and compassion. After months of learning, growing, and facing challenges alongside Leora, Daniel finally began to see the full impact of the mysterious offer she had made. What had once seemed strange, confusing, and even overwhelming had now become a journey of discovery, trust, and transformation. His life, once quiet and ordinary, had taken on a depth and richness he had never imagined. He realized that the bond he shared with Leora had changed not just his days, but his understanding of what life could truly mean. The changes in Daniel were evident even in small ways. He woke up each morning with purpose, feeling ready to face the day with calm and focus. His confidence had grown, not from boasting or achievement alone, but from the steady realization that he could handle challenges with patience and care. Tasks that once seemed daunting now felt manageable, and even failures became opportunities for learning. The lessons Leora had guided him through had taught him more than skills. They had taught him resilience, empathy, and the value of trust. Leora, too, seemed transformed in subtle ways. Though she had always been quiet and reserved, Daniel noticed that she smiled more often, her eyes carrying a warmth that spoke of relief and contentment. She trusted him fully now in the small routines they shared, preparing meals, tending the garden, working together on delicate tasks, had become a rhythm that brought comfort to both of them. It was as if the quiet house next door had grown alive with a sense of shared purpose and mutual understanding. One crisp morning, Daniel walked over to Leora's house, carrying a basket of fresh bread he had baked himself. Leora opened the door with a gentle smile, her eyes reflecting surprise and delight. "You made this?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded, feeling a quiet pride. "I wanted to try," he said simply. They shared the bread together, sitting on the porch as the sun slowly climbed into the sky. The light reflected off Leora's hair and the little objects scattered around her garden, making everything seem peaceful and alive. As they sat together, Leora spoke in her gentle, careful voice. "Daniel, I want you to know how much you've grown. Not just in skill, but in heart. You've learned to trust, to stay calm under pressure, and to see beyond the surface of things. You've become someone who can understand the world in ways few others can." Daniel listened quietly, feeling a warmth spread through him. He realized that the journey they had shared had not only helped him grow, but it also helped Leora heal. Her trust in him, her patience, and her guidance had created a connection that transformed them both. Over the following weeks, Daniel and Leora continued their shared routines, but now there was a sense of calm mastery. The tasks that once felt mysterious and challenging were now familiar, and Daniel approached them with confidence and care. He understood the subtle cues in Leora's guidance, could anticipate the steps needed, and found satisfaction in completing each task successfully. The bond between them had deepened to the point where words were often unnecessary. They could communicate through shared glances, gestures, and an unspoken understanding. One evening, Daniel noticed Leora standing at the edge of her garden, looking at the stars. He joined her quietly, feeling a sense of reverence for the stillness around them. The night sky was clear, the stars twinkling brightly, and the world felt vast and full of possibilities. Leora spoke softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "The world is bigger than we realize, and life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." Daniel nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Their journey together had shown him that life's mysteries were not meant to frighten, but to teach and inspire. Daniel realized that the most important lessons he had learned were not about the tasks themselves, but about the connection, trust, and shared experiences that made those tasks meaningful. He had learned to see beyond appearances, to value patience and understanding, and to recognize the strength that comes from working together. Leora had shown him that even in quiet, ordinary moments, there was beauty, purpose, and growth waiting to be discovered. As time passed, Daniel noticed changes in himself beyond his skills and confidence. He was more thoughtful in his decisions, more compassionate toward others, and more aware of the small joys in life. The loneliness he had once felt had faded, replaced by a sense of belonging and purpose. He realized that Leora's mysterious offer had been about more than tasks. It had been about opening his heart and mind to new possibilities, and about learning to trust in others and in himself. One afternoon, Daniel and Leora worked together in the garden, planting new flowers and tending to the existing ones. The air was filled with the scent of earth and blossoms, and the quiet hum of insects and birds made the moment feel alive. Daniel paused to look at Leora, noticing the way her eyes sparkled in the sunlight, reflecting satisfaction and peace. He felt a deep gratitude for her presence in his life, for the lessons she had taught him, for the trust she had placed in him. "You've changed my life, Liara," Daniel said softly. "I didn't know what to expect when you made your offer, but now I see how much it has meant to me. I've learned so much, and I feel different, better." Liara smiled, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "And you've changed mine," she replied. "Through trust, patience, and shared effort, we've both grown. That was always the goal, to find someone who could understand, and to create something meaningful together." Their friendship had become a partnership in the truest sense. They supported each other, learned from each other, and shared in the joys and challenges of everyday life. Daniel understood that Liara's offer, though mysterious at first, had been an invitation to experience life in a deeper, richer way. It had taught him that true transformation often comes from trust, connection, and the courage to embrace the unknown as the seasons changed. Daniel and Liara continued to share quiet moments, meaningful tasks, and gentle laughter. Their bond became a foundation for a life that was no longer lonely or predictable. Daniel felt a sense of peace and fulfillment he had never known, and he understood that the lessons he had learned would stay with him forever. He had learned that life's true value is not measured by routine or comfort, but by connection, trust, and the willingness to grow alongside someone who believes in you. One late evening, Daniel and Liara sat together on the porch, watching the stars and reflecting on their journey. The world around them was calm and quiet, yet full of potential and beauty. Daniel realized that what had begun as a simple act of kindness, helping a neighbor with groceries, had blossomed into a journey of trust, growth, and transformation that would shape both their lives forever. Liara's mysterious offer had led him to discover strength, patience, and a sense of purpose he never knew existed in that quiet moment. Daniel understood the true meaning of their journey. It was not just about tasks or responsibility. It was about connection, trust, and the courage to embrace the unknown. It was about finding someone who could see beyond the surface, who could guide and support you, and who could share in the joys and challenges of life. He realized that life, when shared with someone who understands and believes in you, can be extraordinary, even in the simplest of moments. From that day forward, Daniel approached life with a new sense of clarity and purpose. He continued to work alongside Liara, learning and growing with each passing day. The mysterious offer that had once seemed so strange and uncertain had become a guiding force in his life, shaping his character, his perspective, and his heart. He knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he could face them with confidence, patience, and trust. Knowing that he had Liara by his side, Daniel's life had been forever changed, not by grand events or sudden fortune, but by the quiet, steady journey of trust, learning, and connection. He had discovered that even in the ordinary moments there is potential for extraordinary growth. Liara, once a mysterious and distant neighbor, had become a guide, a teacher, and a friend who had helped him see the world and himself in a new light. Together, they had created a life that was richer, more meaningful, and filled with the quiet joy of shared experience. In the end, Daniel understood that transformation comes not from avoiding the unknown, but from embracing it with trust, courage, and an open heart. Liara's offer had been more than a request. It had been an invitation to grow, to connect, and to discover the true depth and beauty of life. And through that journey, Daniel found not only purpose, confidence, and wisdom, but also a connection that would last a lifetime.